All right, proving that I am as easily distracted as I always thought I am. Uh, Way too much time watching YouTube videos, so I'm a little bit behind schedule today. But seeing as I'm the only one listening to this, so hi, it's the 18th of December, 2016, and probably the last one I'm going to do in 2000. Don't know if I'm going to do one on New Year's Day, which is the next Sunday I'll be off, but we'll see what goes. This is on writing and such. Me babbling on about writing, and today I think I'm going to talk about what I write, why I write, and uh, regards in that nature. And hello, David Susif. Thank you for watching. Um, as I've said in previous videos, I actually started writing back in 1975, writing some truly horrendous Space 1999 uh, fan fictions. Of course, back in the 70s, fan fiction was not a term, but I wrote them, and they were really bad. And as I've said before, no, no copies exist. Don't ask. Um, then in '77, when Star Wars came out, I actually decided, hey, this is what I want to do. And I seriously started writing. And to be quite honest, that first thing that I wrote was it was a ripoff of Star Wars, imaginatively titled Solar Attacks. Yeah, I had a knack for titles back then. But I kept going, I kept writing, and I kept creating new characters, and that led me down my path to where I am now. Self published author, still trying to figure out how to market. But along the way, you come across some interesting things. Because I was born brilliantly creative and not rich, I do have to work a full time job. And currently, I'm working a 3:30 to midnight shift, which really makes it hard to plan out the rest of the day and also screws up my sleep schedule, but that's beside the point. So you try and carve in time to write when you can. Um, but I remember back some years ago, I worked at a Home Depot. We worked a 9 hour day and we had an hour lunch. And I would always bring a notebook with me to write on my lunch break. This was before a smartphone, so I had an iPod, and I would sit there. I'd have my headphones on, and I'd be sitting there writing and eating my lunch. And you would think that if you saw somebody wearing headphones, you wouldn't start talking to them without letting them know you needed to speak to them. But one day, somebody walks up to me and just starts talking. So after I noticed him, took out the earbuds, and I asked him what he needed. He asked me what I was doing, and I said, writing a novel. He got this really confused look on his face and asked, why? And for a minute, all I could do was stare. And then I gave him my usual answer to that question, which is a quote by Isaac Asimov. I write for the same reason I breathe, because if I didn't, I would die. And he looked really, really puzzled and backed away from me. Which kind of leads to what some people seem to think. They seem to think that books come from hollow trees and forests, along with Keebler crackers and cookies. Interesting though, I used to when people used to ask me where I get my ideas from, I used to tell them that um, I would get them from by the 6 pack from a small factory in Battle Creek, Michigan, right next to the place where they make Pop Tarts. When somebody asked me for the address, I had to stop doing that. It it's strange because people will sit there and they'll read, but it's like they can't comprehend where those words are coming from. They can't comprehend the fact of sitting there and writing. So for me, writing um, has always been therapy. It's always been uh, it's been a high for me. It's as I've said, the only time I'm truly happy is when I'm writing, and much to the dismay of my parents. But I love writing. I enjoy writing, and it's the act of writing that makes me feel fulfilled, and it also fulfills that basic need to want to play God with people's lives. And excuse me, I'm just flipping through notes here. And I got hooked very early about what I. No, excuse me. I'm partly winging it here, so um, I've always been a science fiction fan. I am an original Star Trek fan. I remember watching it vaguely when I was a kid, when we still lived in the Bronx. Um, and I was always attracted to it. I don't know. It always science fiction always gave me some hope that there maybe would be a future. So I was always hooked on science fiction, science fantasy. Hello, Tony. Thank you for watching. I would always like the more fantastic things, but I was always more concerned with the characters. Um, Not so much the technology. From a geek perspective, I was always interested in technology. I love reading about like how the warp drive works in Star Trek, but I never really put that much into my stories. I'm not an engineer. I can sit there and figure it out, but I'm writing fiction, not a textbook. And I always focus more on characters. And I have been told more than once that I can't write the way I write because I'm what's referred to as a seat of the pants writer. I don't use plot outlines. I generally have a vague idea of where a story is going, but I don't really have a firm idea on how to get there. Sometimes I'll have a starting point, have to figure out where it goes. Sometimes I'll have an end, I'll have to figure out how to get there. Sometimes I'll have both the beginning and end and have to figure out what's in the middle. I feel this gives the story a more organic feeling, with each scene growing naturally from the next one. It does slow me down though, because there are times when I have to stop, put the stories aside, and try and figure out what happens next. I will sometimes make general notes, uh, just of what's coming next, but even those I don't really follow precisely. It's more like, as I said, general notes. And I've had people tell me there's no way I could write. Even when I was sitting in front of someone, I was sitting in front of an English teacher writing, and he's telling me, you can't, there's no way you can do that. I'm sitting in front of you and doing it. The problem I have with plot outlines is that it's all in my head. I'm constantly turning over the story ideas. Hello, Bruce and Donald. Thank you also for watching. I do all my real writing in my head subconsciously on stories, no matter what I'm doing. I'm writing now. I've got 4 stories that I'm focusing on, and I'm working on them now. And I'm also thinking ahead to the editing I have to do tonight. And I'm moving plot points around, thinking about, okay, one character does this, if then what happens next. Having a plot outline means I'm kind of locked into what I've figured out, and if I need to change something, I have to redo that whole plot outline. And that's a good thing. That to me, that's the good thing about writers. I mean, as W. Somerset Maugham once said, there are 3 rules to writing a novel. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. Everybody does the same thing differently. Whatever I'm a big proponent of whatever works for you, do it. I like writing everything out by hand in spiral notebooks and then typing everything up. Um, my problem is my handwriting is so bad that I have trouble reading it sometimes. That's why I had to stop writing in cursive. After the story's finished, I do go through about at least 4 edits, about 6 weeks apart. Some stories do take longer. Brianna and the Three took about 6 or 7 edits before I was actually satisfied with it. I do tend to go a bit into the future. The closest I've ever come to the present. Actually, I do have a couple stories that take place in the fictional present. My vampire novel that I'm working on, called Under the Dark of the Moon, three-quarters of the way finished and still not done. 75,000 words in, and I also have actually the story I have to edit later. Upon a Far Distant Shore is set in the current present in my fictional universe. But I like to go a little bit farther into the future. A lot of the stories take place in the late 22nd century, early 23rd century. That allows me to reach into, um, extrapolate a bit on what might come. I never plot a story in advance, and the last time I made a plot outline was actually high school. I'll just start writing and see where the character goes. One of the story that I'm editing later today, Upon a Far Distant Shore, I actually started out with just a picture of a person laying face down in the street in the rain. I had no idea who the person was. Eventually figured out who she was, what she was doing, and how she got there, and then the story grew from that point. It was probably about eight times restarting the story before it actually got to the point where I was able to um, continue with it. For me, plot is organic and grows out of the story as it moves along. I'd be constantly rewriting the plot outlines if I didn't. And actually, I have a quote here from my favorite author, Robert Heinlein, in which he addresses plotting in his own novels, and I kind of do the same thing. Uh, Quote, he says, I don't understand plotting, and probably I don't. I have been congratulated many times on the skill shown in my plotting when I knew damn well that the story in question had not been plotted in advance at all. My notion of a story is an interesting situation in which a human being has to cope with a problem, does so, and thereby changes his personality, character, or evaluations in some measure because the coping has forced him to revise his thinking. How he copes with it, I can't plot because that depends on his character, and I don't know what his character is until I get acquainted with him. Once I can hear the character talk, then I'm all right. He works out his own salvation. That's pretty much how I go. I have an idea of what the characters are like at the start of the story. I know where they're going, and then I figure then they lead me along the way. I generally refer to it as the characters talking to me, and people look at me like they're not real people. It's like, yeah, they are. They're just in another universe. Only I can see them. And don't mind me. And the other thing I really wanted to address, because I don't even know why I do this, if you look at most of my stories, most of my characters, most of my main point of view characters are women. And I don't know, to be honest with you, why I do that. I know it started after I read Robert Heinlein's Friday, which is my favorite of all his novels, right up there with Stranger in a Strange Land, and Glory Road. Like I said, I don't know why it just feels more natural for me to do that, to write a female main character. It takes a little bit longer because being a guy, it's kind of hard to write the opposite sex. Not impossible, but it is difficult because there's different points of view. But I've managed to go along pretty well so far. Um, to quote Joss Whedon, he once said, he was asked why he keeps writing strong female characters, and his answer was, because you keep asking me that question. I don't know. I maybe subconsciously I just don't feel that there are enough female characters that I would like to read. I mean, but that's something that we figure out as we go along. Um, and I think that is going to be about it for now. Anybody have any questions, complaints, gripes? I talk too much. I talk too fast. Why am I bothering? Um, if not, like I said, I don't know if I'm going to do one on in 2 weeks on New Year's Day, which is my next um, Sunday off, but we'll see what happens. Um, all the books, With Eyes Open, Campfire Stories, A Bright Symmetry, The Fault Lies Not, Ray, On a Cold Wind, and Brianna and the Three are all available on my website, Word Boys Words, at wordboy1.wixsite.com/wordboyswords. I'll put that link, um, excuse me, in the comments below. You're welcome, Bruce. And we will. If my only request is, if you do buy a copy of any of the books, please, when you're finished with it, go back, put up a review. It'll certainly help raise attention to the books. Thank you guys for listening, and take care. And appropriate for the movie that just premiered 2 days ago. May the force be with you. Bye.